I call this meeting to order. Welcome back to meeting number 80 of the House of Commons Standing Committee on Natural Resources. Today we are meeting in public to discuss committee business. When we suspended on Monday evening, Mr. Angus had the floor and we had resumed debate on the sub-amendment of Mr. Falk.
What was that?
Sorry.
I had a point of order. Mr. Jones.
So, Mr. Jennis, Mr. Angus has the floor.
I haven't started my point of order yet, Chair. But
So
he doesn't have the floor. But
on the point of order.
Yes, Chair. I have been trying to raise a number of points of order respecting this committee, and I think if you look back at the record, I have been continually interrupted by you in attempts to raise those points of order. At the same time, you've allowed other members of the committee, well, let's call a spade here. You've allowed members of your own party on this committee to, at great length, raise points of order, and you've not allowed me at any point to complete the point of order that I've been trying for a long time to raise.
Mr. Jennis, I'll ask you to hold.
Here we go again.
We have as Mr. Angus had the floor, you had a point of order. Mr. Angus has a point of order. Mr. Angus, on the point of order.
Thank you. Yes, it is now probably in 6 hours since I've been denied my right to speak, but I'm raising a point of order because of the attempt by Mr. Jennis to undermine the chair. When the chair speaks, he's not interrupting. When a chair rules, the committee either accepts the rule or they challenge it. Mr. Jennis speaks over the chair. He undermines the chair. He claims that the chair interrupts him when he doesn't have the floor. And so if either Mr. Jennis can challenge the chair or he must stop interrupting the chair, but it's the chair who sets the tone for the meeting, and the chair I would like to thank, by the way, for the respect that he shows for the process.
Thank you, Mr. Angus. On the point of order, and I think this is a good opportunity for me to remind all committee members, when my light goes on, I want to give committee members an opportunity to pause so we're not speaking over each other, because we know from a previous meeting our interpreters are doing a tremendous job. But when we have multiple mics on, multiple members speaking, it makes the job of the interpreters, very difficult, but most importantly, it's a health and safety concern. So I would remind all colleagues, I would like one member to speak at a time, and I do have to intervene in certain cases. I will turn on my mic so you can see the light come on. If I believe you do not see the mic, I will ask you to pause so I can interject and recognize another member if there is another member to be recognized. Now, Mr. Angus had the floor. We had a point of order by Mr. Jennis, and now Ms. Stubbs has a point of order on Mr. Jennis's comments. A point of order.
I'll get to it as soon as we're not conflicting with each other. And thank you, of course, for the indulgence for me to make my point without interruption. So just before we begin, I do want to bring attention to an important and what should be a priority issue for this committee. Just to give verbal notice of the following motion that I submitted previously. Given that the Prime Minister has unfairly extended a carbon tax exemption to home heating oil and has not applied the exemption to all forms of home heating.
Can I ask you to hold, please?
Given that Liberal MPs voted against
So, Ms. Stubbs, can I ask you to hold?
On applying a temporary pause to all home heating, the committee immediately undertake a 5-year review of carbon tax policy in Canada and the disproportionate impact the Prime Minister's unfair carbon tax carve-out has.
So, colleagues, I'm going to begin before I move to the point of orders. As I began this meeting, I thought I made myself quite clear that for the health and safety of our interpreters, we are not going to turn on our mics and speak over each other. Just like in the House of Commons, when the speaker rises, when I turn on my mic and I attempt to speak, I expect all committee members to ensure that they are not speaking, so we can address and make sure this committee functions well, and that all members have an opportunity to participate. I would remind members that point of orders are regarding a procedural issue. If there's a procedural issue and you want to raise a point of order. So now, Mr. Bruson, Ms. Stubbs, you had raised a point of order, but Mr. Bruson has a point of order on your point of order. So I'm going to go to Ms. DeBruson. Well, excuse me, Mr. Bruson, you have the floor.
I have a point of order.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I was just saying that I don't believe a person can bring a motion on a point of order. And so that's what my point of order was. It was a matter of the rules.
Thank you, Mr. Bruson. So,
Point of clarification.
thank you, Mr. Bruson, on the point of order. You are correct. A motion cannot be moved on a point of order. We do have a point of order from Mr. Jennis. Okay. Mr. Jennis, on the point of order.
Thank you, Chair. I do want to point out that before you suspended the last exchange, you and Mr. Bruson both had your microphones on at the same time and were speaking at the same time. So I appreciate the injunction around not having multiple microphones. I mean, there are a few other things going on around the microphones,
Point of order, please.
such as right now. And also, there have been a number of instances where the mics have been turned on. I understand it's the common practice at committee for staff to turn on members' mics when they start speaking, but that does create a little bit of a challenge when someone's trying to raise a point of order and there are other people that are speaking. I would ask the clerk maybe to clarify, if you'll allow the clerk to speak, just on the issue of providing notices of motion on points of order. I genuinely don't know the answer on this question, but I know that there have been many other committees where notices of motion have been provided on points of order.
Yeah. On this committee, actually, under the former chair.
From what I thought, that the practice of verbal notice of motion is fairly informal because you're not actually moving a motion. You're just providing notice that a motion is coming, so that can happen on points of order. That can happen during rounds of questions. That can happen in other instances. So I do think it's an important point whether or not Ms. Stubbs' motion was put on notice or not, because I think, from what I understand, there's a precedent even at this committee for that having been done in the past. Although I will acknowledge, in terms of whether this is spoken to specifically in the rule book, I don't know. So Chair, I wonder if you would. I had an original point of order that I was raising, but before I come back to that, I wonder if you allow the clerk to
Mr.
weigh
Jennis,
in on that.
A point of order is for if there's a procedural issue have required not to move a motion. So thank you for your point of order. I'm going to proceed to the next point of order that Mr. Angus had. Mr. Angus, on a point of order.
Thank you.
Mr. Angus, on the point of order.
Thank you. Sorry,
You know
Chair.
what, Mr. Jennis, I would ask you, I allowed you to speak on a point of order. I gave you the time to do. We will move to Mr. Angus on a point of order, and then I have others as well on the same point of order. So
Thank you.
Mr. Angus on the point of order.
Thank you, Chair. You had raised a concern a number of times at the last meeting that literally the health and safety of staff who are working for the House are being put at risk by the behavior of Ms. Stubbs, Mr. Jennis, and Mr. Patzer. And yet what we see already, you raised it once, and they're interrupting you. So I'm asking, this is an issue of health and safety. We have people who are using their mics to undermine the work of committee, and this is all about denying me the floor. So I would ask you, Chair, to reiterate the necessity of making sure that our House staff are not subject to this kind of abuse. They can abuse their other colleagues, but they can't abuse the staff in this
Mr.
manner.
Angus, thank you for the point of order. Colleagues, Mr. Patzer, I'm going to come to you next, but before I do, I'm looking around the room, and I thought last meeting, partway through, we actually started to work quite well on respecting each other and not to speak over each other and waiting. As I acknowledged, I know sometimes you're not looking, but when I turn this mic on, you'll see this red light come on, and I don't want to interrupt you. But I must at some point if you do not see or we do not make contact. So I want to allow all members to participate. I want to allow all members the ability, if you have a point of order, to make sure you have that opportunity. But not all of us at the same time, because it is very difficult for the interpreters to follow the interpretation, but also for their health and safety concerns. And I'm going to keep raising this point. And if I believe that their health and safety is being compromised by the work of this committee, I will not hesitate. I will not, let it be clear, hesitate to suspend. Okay? And I think, Mr. Angus, that was a part of your point of order. And so this was stated last meeting as well. I will state it again very clearly here. Now, Mr. Patzer, I have you next on the point of order. The floor is yours on the point of order.
Thank you. So on Mr. Angus's point of order, and actually this applies to several issues here, and I think this would actually help with the interpreters. When one of us, a Conservative member, has the floor and somebody else raises a point of order, we are immediately cut off by the chair. Mr. Angus was speaking. I let him go for a little while, and I had a point of order I wanted to bring, but I wanted to let him finish, but there came a point in time where I was like, no, I just point of order on what he was saying. And I respectfully, you saw me, I didn't hammer my mic, I wasn't yelling to my microphone, I put my hand up, and I said, point of order, Chair, respectfully. And you just kind of put your hand up and just let him go on and on and on. Correct. Equal and fair treatment of all members by the chair is a general and accepted rule of practice by the chair. I read it multiple times in multiple instances in Boston Gagnon. That's a standard practice. We expect the chair to be equal and to be fair. We do. So now,
thank you.
Now, hang on.
Now I'm gonna interject because I gave you a time to pause. Mr. Angus, no, but on the point of order, all members, as I stated, have the right, and I do appreciate you, Mr. Patzer, for putting out your hand and signaling to me. As Mr. Angus looked towards me, I asked him to finish his point of order. I did interject and allowed you to speak. And I will allow other members to participate in the same manner. But if multiple people start saying point of order, I'm not sure whose point of order is before whose. I'm going to do my best job to ensure that all members have that ability. Like I recognized you, and like I'm going to recognize another member. So now I'm going to go to a point of order by Ms. DeBrusen, and then I'm going to go to the next point of order. Yeah. So
she can go now, but I wasn't finished.
So if it's a different point of order, I understand. But you.
She can go, and then after she's done.
If you have another point of order, we can go. Mr. Bruson on the point of order.
So once again, my understanding is that Mr. Angus has the floor. We have a scheduling motion in front of us, and there is a sub-amendment. I'm just trying to bring this up because all this happened actually a week ago. So we are talking about a sub-amendment to a scheduling motion so that we can go forward on legislation that was voted on by the House to send to this committee. And all of these points of orders keep happening, but at this point, we haven't been able, we would have had the minister in front of us already if we had just managed to get through the sub-amendment and then the motion. So I would say unless the Conservatives are challenging the chair, your ruling has been that Mr. Angus has the floor. Can we please continue with the debate?
Okay. Colleagues, yes, you do, and I will recognize you in a moment.
Can I finish my point of order now?
Well, I think I've addressed your point of order. If you have another point of order, I'll ask you once again, colleagues. I I don't need a number of people to tell me who's next or who's not. I heard a point of order on your point of order. I've addressed that. And if there's another member, I will address then. I want to remind colleagues, we have a motion on the floor by Mr. Sorbera. We have an amendment by Ms. Stubbs. We have another amendment on Timmins, which last we have Mr. Angus on the floor, who is our next speaker, who hasn't been allowed to speak. Now, colleagues, we've all discussed last meeting the importance of this bill and the amendments. I hope today we can get through this sub-amendment that on Timmins, go through our speaking order on Timmins, all the members who want to debate this important component of the sub-amendment, so we can get to the amendment that Ms. Stubbs had brought forward, and we can debate that, and then we can get to the main motion. I'm really hoping that we can work together as a committee, the Standing Committee on Natural Resources, who's studying the motion of Mr. Sorbera that is brought forward on Bill C-50 and Bill C-49, and then the additional amendment that Ms. Stubbs has brought forward. This is the work of this committee that Canadians expect us to do. And so if we can work together, everybody will have an opportunity to participate in debate, and we can move forward. So now, I think I needed all members to be very clear on where we're at, because Ms. DeBrusen, you reminded us, and I thought I should remind committee members of where we are at as well, so there's no confusion. Now, hold on. We had a point of order on Mr. Patzer's point of order by Mr. Jennis. Mr. Jennis, on Mr. Patzer's point of order, you have a point of order, and then there's another point of order. Sure. So go ahead.
Chair, I had an earlier point of order, but I did want to raise a point of order in the particular context of your comments. Now, your present framing is as if the operation of a committee is difficult. The running of a committee is not normally difficult if the chair is guided by the rules and with basic fairness towards all members. And I think you are creating a problem by treating members in radically different ways.
Point of order.
And I suspect we're about to see exactly how that happens. Mm-hmm. The rules provide that every member should be treated equally.
Point of order.
And that members have rights and privileges as members of Parliament.
Mm-hmm. So,
and that means that when
Mr. Jennis,
a member has the floor...
Mr. Jennis, I'm going to cut you off there.
Yes, you are.
Yes. You have not...
Exhibit D.
I'm not sure I understood your point of order and what the point of the point of order was, but we have 2 point of orders now on something. We're going to go to Mr. Angus on the point of order. Colleagues, once again, I would encourage all colleagues not to use point of orders as points of debate. Be specific, be succinct on procedurally what your point of order is referring to, so we can get out of point of orders and get back to committee's business. Now, Mr. Angus, you raised a point of order on Mr. Jennis's point of order.
Thank you. Yes, Chair, and it is about 6 hours since I've been denied the right to speak as a member of this committee. But the reason I objected is that Mr. Jennis continues to undermine your decisions, but he doesn't have the respect for this committee to make a challenge to the chair. If he doesn't have a respect to make a challenge for the chair, he needs to sit down and let the committee do its business. Otherwise, he continues to interrupt. So if he has a challenge to the chair, he can bring a challenge to the chair. And then
Angus,
once again, we see this turning into a circus.
Mr. Angus,
we need the respect for the committee.
Thank you for your point of order. Colleagues, I would also state that we've discussed this previously. The chair has ruled, and it was upheld by the ruling of this committee. If you are unable, if you would like to challenge the chair on a decision, if you would like to challenge the chair on a specific ruling as committee members, you have the right to do so. and then it's up to the committee to decide. So please, I would ask committee members, if you would like to challenge a ruling that I have made, please challenge the chair and have that amongst your committee members to make the decision accordingly. Now, I want to go back to the point of order by Ms. Lapointe. Ms. Lapointe, thank you for waiting patiently on a point of order.
Thank you, Chair. My point of order is around the unparliamentary behavior and remarks that we see from our Conservative colleagues. The remarks from MP Janus would seem to indicate a lack of respect for the chair. We have to understand that the chair is not just another member of this committee. He has responsibilities to preside over the proceedings of this committee. We cannot continue to speak over him. I also find it difficult, even when mics aren't on, for comments to be made when someone does have a mic and is speaking. I'm trying to listen attentively. It is very difficult. So I will ask everyone around this table to please respect the proceedings, respect the chair. We are here several days and hours later to try and get to some very important legislation. This legislation, I can tell you, is important to the people of Sudbury, and we need to get on with the work at hand.
Ms. Stubbs, thank you. I mean, sorry, my apologies. Ms. Lapointe, thank you for your interjection and your point of order. Colleagues, I'll address that in a sec. Ms. Lapointe, I will give you an opportunity, Mr. Jennis. Ms. Lapointe does make a valid point through the point of order of that it is difficult for members to focus and participate when our mics are on, and it's very difficult for the interpreters for health and safety concerns, as I previously mentioned. But also when a number of us are talking across the floor, it makes it difficult to focus on the sub-amendment, the amendments, and everything at hand. So I would ask all members, if you are having a side conversation with one of your colleagues, whisper, and so we all can focus on the important work we're doing here. Now, Mr. Jennis, I have you on a point of order on Ms. Stubbs' point of order. Is that correct?
Well, I wanted to raise a point of order in respect to Ms. Lapointe, who
I'm sorry, Ms. Lapointe. My apologies, Ms. Stubbs.
Yeah.
No problem.
Ms. Lapointe.
She'll be sitting on that side of the table after the election, but not before.
No, but it was Mr. Jennis on the point of order. Please be succinct on the point of order.
Sure. Yeah.
You're not.
No. But
You're not allowed to joke.
Ms.
Because you're a conservative. Okay.
Ms. Lapointe called out my alleged language was unparliamentary. She didn't cite specific language.
Mr. Jennis, I'm going to ask you to just pause for a second.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Right. As usual.
Mr. Bruson on the point of order.
Totally, it's amazing.
Decorum again, Mr. Speaker, like the amount of disrespect. And again, Mr. Chair, like what we have here is you've made a ruling. We haven't been able to stick to that ruling because the Conservatives are not challenging the chair. They're just interrupting so that Mr. Angus cannot take the floor. And Mr. Angus, on your ruling, has the floor. So are the Conservatives going to challenge the chair, or are they going to keep interrupting? And when they do it, the heckling and the way that they're speaking completely lacks respect and decorum for other members. It's really unparliamentary, and I think that people and workers who are watching and hoping to see us actually work on this legislation would be shocked to see the level of disrespect that is being shown by our Conservative members right now.
Okay, so colleagues, Mr. Jennis, if you succinct on the point of order, because I have other members on a point of order who have been waiting patiently, and I want to get to them. So it's back to you, but we have. So very succinctly on the point of order, so I can move to the next point of order.
Chair, I'll be as succinct as my good colleagues across the way have been, and I will expect the same courtesy from the chair as you have shown to members of your own party. Ms. Lapointe suggested that I had used unparliamentary language. I take that accusation very seriously, and I would ask her to cite what language I used that was allegedly unparliamentary. That is important to me, and I think it's something that Ms. Lapointe should respond to. As far as the implication that I do not think the chair of this committee is doing a good job in discharging his functions, I will happily assent to the fact that I do not think the chair of this committee is fulfilling the functions of his office in a remotely proper way in accordance with the rules. And I say that out of respect for the importance of that office. If I didn't think that office wasn't important, I wouldn't care. The reason I care is because the rules in this place protect all of us.
Mr. Janice?
They protect every member and every party.
Mr. Janice, I'll ask you to. Okay. Thank you for your point. Well, I have several points. I have several points of order, and I'm going to go to.
What did I say?
You're talking across the table, right?
I said his mic.
Right.
Mine's not.
After you just scolded us for doing
I
the
want
same, right?
to know what I said. That was unparliamentary.
So, colleagues,
Obviously, it would have to be cited for such a claim or allegation.
I'm going to go. I'm asking all members here to use parliamentary language. As we conduct the business of this committee, we focus on doing our work on the amendments and the sub-amendment that we're working on, and that if any member should not use unparliamentary language as a part of the proceedings of this committee. So thank you for raising your point of order, Mr. Janice. I'm going to go to Monsieur Simard. I'm going to go to Monsieur Simard. I'm going to go to Monsieur Simard on the point of order. Monsieur Simard's been waiting very patiently. And Monsieur Simard, if you just give me a moment.
Désolé. Il est confus.
I'm sorry, I have no point of order. There's some confusion. There are lots of endless points of order. I don't want to add to that, but I simply want to say, Mr. Chair, can we focus on one thing? That's what we said the last time. Is it possible to identify what the point of order is referring to? Are we raising a point of order referring to the fact that our conservative friends do not agree with the decision you made? Otherwise, we'll be going on and on till December, till Christmas, if we don't stop this. I would like my conservative colleagues to be conscious that there are people at home watching them. I don't believe they can use this on their social media to say that they are defending their electors. So I would like to encourage my conservative colleagues to identify, and quickly so, what they are talking about when they raise the point of order. Is the objective is simply to waste our time? Then they will have to answer to their electors who are listening and watching this sad comedy that serves no purpose. Mr. Chair, maybe we should adopt a method of working. Let's identify what the point of order we are raising is referring to. If we are talking about speaking time that Mr. Genus seems to claim he's entitled to but has not received, then it's be stated clearly. If not, then everyone will know that he's simply seeking to waste our precious time.
First of all, I'm going to address Monsieur Simard, and thank you, Monsieur Simard, because I was listening very diligently to what you were saying, and thank you to the interpreters for interpreting so well. So previously, where we're at on the sub-amendment to the amendment on Timmins. We've proceeded. Mr. Angus was given the floor to proceed after the committee upheld a previous ruling, after the chair was challenged and a previous ruling was upheld. We have proceeded with Mr. Angus, who has the floor. Mr. Angus has been waiting, I think, patiently. He's for the number of hours he stated, but we have Mr. Angus on the floor. And colleagues, I'll remind people, since we started the motion, the amendment, and the sub-amendment, if you would like to speak on any of these, raise your hand. We'll put you on the queue to be able to participate in this important debate on the sub-amendment of Timmins. If you do not want to debate the sub-amendment of Timmins that Mr. Falk brought forward, we can proceed and committee can decide on that sub-amendment. But if we are not allowing members to participate, we cannot move forward into that sub-amendment. Now, Mr. Angus, before I go to you, we have several other points of order. I want to go, as these members have been waiting patiently, on their point of orders. And yeah, we have Mr. Angus next on the point of order, and then I have another member, and I will go to the other member when Mr. Angus is done on the point of order. But I will also remind colleagues, use your point of order and please identify procedurally what your issue is. Be succinct. It's not an opportunity to get into a lengthy debate, but please be succinct with your point of order so it's clear. Thank you. No, we will go to Mr. Angus.
Thank you, Chair.
On the point
Thank
of
you, Chair.
order. Mr. Angus, on the point of order.
Thank you, Chair. Well, I had raised earlier my concern about the health and safety of the staff, but what equally concerns me now is that I sit the furthest from the chair, so I'm trying to hear the rulings, and it's my right to participate is interfered with by what is turning into sounds like a barroom mob action, and baiting members on the other side doesn't help. So while the chair's trying to speak, I hear a number of conservatives heckling, picking fights, and then saying that they don't respect the chair. It is interfering with my rights. I'm asking, Chair, that that you actually can tell the Conservatives that they have to show respect and stop interfering and heckling so that I can do my duty. I can't even hear you speak half the time because the Conservatives are turning this into a mob.
That's unparliamentary.
Yeah, because the mob is an actual thing, right?
A mob is a dangerous criminal organization.
Thank you, Mr. Angus. On the point of order, colleagues, all members want to participate on this committee without interruption. I'm doing the best I can to navigate through everybody here, and if you raise that you do want to speak, like members have, I will acknowledge members to the best of my ability. Everybody's getting an opportunity to participate here. Mr. Angus also wants to participate in the debate on, I believe this is his riding of Timmins, that Mr. Falk has brought forward a motion on, and other members around the table here would also like to participate on this important amendment. So I'm going to ask everybody once again. I'm hoping we can move forward and let all members participate. Now, okay, so look, before I go to the point of order, and we are point of ordering on everybody's pointing of orders here, I do remind colleagues to be very succinct. I know, Mr. Aldag, I have you next, but Mr. Patzer has a point of order and Mr. Angus his point of order. So I'm going to give Mr. Patzer the floor. But Mr. Patzer, I'm going to ask you to be succinct as possible and identify what your point of order is.
There we go. Yes, thank you. I'll be very, very succinct. I just think it would be beneficial for the committee to be aware that over the 3 previous meetings, Mr. Angus has raised no less than 57 points of order. So when we want to talk about who is actually interrupting and preventing members from speaking, Mr. Angus is leading the charge. And in this meeting alone, he's had no less than 5 points of order. Thank you.
Okay. I would ask, let's focus on the task at hand. Mr. Bruson on the point of order. And I want to go to Mr. Aldag, who's been waiting patiently. Mr. Aldag, you're going to have to wait a little bit more patiently. Mr. Bruson on the point of order.
Mr. Angus has the floor by the chair's own ruling, which keeps on getting interrupted. I think the idea of saying that he's interrupting his own ability to speak is ridiculous. He is not interrupting his ability to speak. He has a floor. That's the ruling of the chair. I say to the members opposite, challenge the chair if you disagree with that ruling, or let Mr. Angus speak.
So, colleagues, once again, Mr. Bruson, thank you for your point of order and the reminder. This committee has proceeded with Mr. Angus has the floor. I have previously stated if a member would like to participate acknowledge, we'll put you on the list, and as your turn comes up, you can participate in the debate. Every member will have the opportunity to participate. Mr. Angus, as Mr. Bruson, you have correctly identified, does have the floor. And if there is a challenge to Mr. Angus having the floor, if there is a challenge, I would ask a member to challenge the chair on the right of Mr. Angus to have the floor. No member here is challenging the chair on that ruling, but members are, unfortunately, we are impeding the work of this committee if we do not let Mr. Angus be able to participate in his debate on Timmins. So I'd like to reset, I hope with a bit of a thoughtful reset from all of us, we can think about allowing the member to move forward on his debate, and then we can all have an opportunity to interject on the amendment and move forward. Now, I'm going to go to Mr. Aldag, who's been waiting patiently. No, Mr. Aldag has a point of order. Mr. Aldag has a point of order. I'm going to recognize Mr. Aldag on the point of order, and then I'm going to go to the next member on a point of order who's been waiting patiently.
Thank you,
go ahead, Mr. Aldag.
So I have been waiting patiently in accordance with the how you set out the speaking order on points of order. And I'm just, we've seen a continued deterioration in the respect for the chair. And that's very concerning for me. In order to have a functioning committee, the chair needs to be able to make rulings on things like points of order, which you're attempting to do, and you're continuing to be interrupted. We have decisions that have been made, rulings that you've made, that Mr. Angus has the floor on a sub-amendment that was put forward related to Timmins. I'm sure that Mr. Angus wants to speak to it. I would like to hear him speak to it, but we have to have an effectively functioning committee with the chair being respected, the chair's rules being followed. And so I just ask all members to move beyond the points of order games that are being played now. Let's get into let the chair rule on points of order as they're raised, but then get back to where we're at, which is actually with Mr. Angus having the floor to debate the sub-amendment.
Thank you.
That's what I implore of this committee.
Thank you, Mr. Aldag, on the point of order. I will remind everybody again that Mr. Angus does have the floor. We are on a sub-amendment on Timmins. It is Mr. Angus's time to speak on this sub-amendment, and I would like, as a member of Parliament for that constituency that I've never been to, but I'd like to know more about what Mr. Angus's concerns about this sub-amendment and the importance of it to the amendment and to the main motion. Now, I would ask a member, if you would like the floor, we can offer them any member on either side of this table to participate. All we have to do is let us know. You'll go in the speaking order on the sub-amendment, and you'll be able to participate in the debate. Now, I'm going to go to a few more point of orders before we get back to get back to where we were. Okay. So, Mr. Callaway, welcome to our committee. Thank you for joining us. You have a point of order.
Sure. Thanks, Mr. Chair. And it is actually great to be here. And I know you're probably thinking, well, what drink did he have before he came here? But I certainly didn't. Number one, I'm hoping I get to hear Mr. Angus take the floor. But I also want to highlight how important the motion and Bill C-49 and C-50 are. If I could, in Atlantic Canada and Nova Scotia, and in particular, in Cape Breton, Canso, where I'm from, the amendment to the Atlantic Accord.
Mr. Callaway, I'm going to ask you to halt because I have a number of people once again. If you could hold, I just want you to focus.
Following the rules. The rules. Common decency is following the rules. You don't just get to make up the rules and assert that. is to follow the rules.
Okay, we will suspend. Colleagues, before I proceed to any more point of orders, I'm going to start by reading a small passage for all members to reflect, to consider and think about, because I believe this is a very important passage of where we're at with this committee. This is in Chapter 20 on page 1058, if anybody wants to write that down and follow along. This is committees and questions of procedure and privilege under the section of disorder and misconduct. Disorder and misconduct in a committee may arise as a result of the failure to abide by the rules and practices of a committee or to respect the authority of the chair. Disorder and misconduct also include the use of unparliamentary language, failure to yield the floor, or persistent interruption of the proceedings in any manner. Okay, this is a very clear statement on page 1058 in chapter 20. So as all of us here on committee as committee members, we should take a moment to reflect on that and think about how we want to proceed moving forward, because it is quite clear in this passage of what our roles as committee members are on this committee. Now, I am going to go back to where we left off, where Mr. Callaway, I had suspended, and I want to remind folks the reason why I suspended, and that's why I read this passage, because of what I found to a number of people speaking across the floor and having conversations that were interrupting the business of this committee. Okay, so Mr. Callaway, my apologies earlier to cut you off, to suspend this meeting. But I did believe that for the best interest of committee members, the health and safety of our interpreters, that we needed to take a pause for a few minutes. And as we're back, Mr. Callaway, I will ask you on the point of order to be succinct and the procedural relevance of your point of order.
The procedural relevance is by hearing Mr. Angus, we can get moving on the motion, which is absolutely critical for my part of the world of Atlantic Canada. It's important to jobs, economic development. It's in terms of new green energy opportunities in Atlantic Canada. So my hope is that we can get moving on this, move to Mr. Angus, so we can get to work on the amendments that need to be made that are going to impact the people, not just in my riding of Cape Breton Council, but all of Atlantic Canada.
Thank you, Mr. Callaway. I think, well, so on the point of orders, you look, colleagues, Mr. Callaway has been, he's a new member to this committee. He's been waiting patiently. He's had his ability to speak. Thank you for providing your point of order, Mr. Callaway, and the importance of allowing the member who has the floor to be able to participate. But now I'm going to proceed. We have several points of orders, and I'm going to proceed to Mr. Jennis on the point of order. Mr. Jennis, I would ask you to be succinct on your point of order, on procedurally your concern, so we can move forward to the next point of order, who one of our colleagues is also waiting to provide a point of order. So, Mr. Jennis. Go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. In the time these proceedings have been going, I have not at any point been able to finish a point of order. In every case when I've raised points of order, they have been in relation to matters of order, unlike the last one. And so I do have a number of matters of order that I do wish to raise. I know Mr. Angus Sanctimonious over there is interrupting with heckling, which I'm not too particular about, honestly, but I just think it should be noted given how,
Mr. Janice, I'm gonna ask you to
strongly he
pause.
responded.
Mr. Janice, I'm
Here
going
we
to ask
go.
you to pause.
I haven't even started.
Well, because we're getting into debate. We are getting into so we've talked about ensuring that we respectfully respect each other on this committee, but that we do not engage in debate and be succinct on the point of order. So I will go back to you, Mr. Janice, but I do want to hear the next member, Mr. Falk, on the point of order, who's been waiting very patiently. If you could be succinct on your point of order, and then we can proceed. Mr. Janice, on the point of order.
Thank you, Chair. I think on decorum, I was pointing out that I was being heckled by Mr. Angus, despite Mr. Angus, describing in the most dramatic terms any instance of someone having a side conversation while he's speaking, and it continues.
Mr.
On
Janice,
matters of order, Chair.
Mr. Janice, I want you to focus on the point of order, not in debate
Sure, that
on
is,
what a
is
member has
matter
said
of
or
order.
not said. On a point of order, you have the point of order. If we can go directly to your point of order, please. I want to give you the opportunity to state your point of order, but we do not want to engage in debate. So the procedural concern
Chair.
on that you would like to raise through your point of order.
Thank you, Chair. One, as a procedural matter, making arguments about procedure is a point of order. It is not a point of debate. It is a point of order to make arguments about procedure, as I was just doing. Number two, questions around Mr. Angus's heckling of other members is a matter of order, and it is definitely a legitimate point of order to raise, especially given that he calls out others. Thirdly, we had points of order.
Mr. Janice, I'm going to ask you to pause on the point of order at that right there, and I'll ask you to continue on your point of order that you've raised in a moment. Mr. Angus, go ahead on the point of order, please.
He's using his platform to make personal attacks, just as he did against Ms. Lapointe. That's not a point of order. That's an attempt to put falsehoods on the record. I'm here to do my job. I've been denied over 6 hours the right to speak on issues of workers. We know that they shut down workers when they came to speak. They've never allowed workers to speak, but he cannot be using his point of order to make personal attacks and falsehoods about me and attempt to insinuate it into the record. He needs to focus. Either he has to challenge the chair or he has to allow other members to participate, and he has obstructed that for 6 hours.
So, Mr. Angus, thank you for your point of order. Mr. Janice, before I go back to you, Mr. Patzer has a point of order on, but colleagues, I just read out a passage on disorder and misconduct. I'm not sure if we've effectively taken the time to reflect on that passage. It's a very important passage that members should take seriously to make sure that all members can participate. Respect, key word. It's a very important word that we all should focus on. Respect of each other and how we conduct ourselves in this committee. So, Mr. Patzer, on the point of order of Mr. Janice or on? Okay, so can I? If you can be succinct as possible on your point of order, so I can go back to Mr. Janice to finish up his point of order, and I can move up to the next members. And refrain from engaging in debate through your point of order. Thank you, Mr. Patzer. Go ahead.
Oh, yes. No, thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I was actually planning to agree with you and just echo your words because you read about persistent interruptions. And again, I will note that's the 7th time Mr. Angus has interrupted one of my colleagues today. Last 3 meetings, 57 times he has point of ordered Conservative members. So if you want to talk about persistent interruptions, there's one member guilty.
So thank you, Mr. Patzer, on your point of order on a part of that passage. But I would also like to remind colleagues, Mr. Angus does have the floor. Mr. Angus has the floor. His inability to participate in this debate is of concern for all of, should be of concern for all members. He has an opportunity to not even, I think, provide a sentence to us yet on the sub-amendment by Mr. Falk on Timmins. There's a number of people who want to speak on the sub-amendment of the inclusion of Timmins with the main motion that was brought forward by Mr. Sobrera. For all the folks who are following along, we had a following amendment by Ms. Stubbs, which we still need to debate. And now we have a sub-amendment by Mr. Falk, who placed a sub-amendment on Timmins. Last as we left, Mr. Angus had the floor. There was no challenge. I would remind colleagues, there was no challenge to the chair's ruling of Mr. Angus having the floor. Mr. Angus has not been able to participate in his debate on this, and other members as well. I know there's other members who are patiently waiting. So I'm going to go back to back to Mr. Janis very quickly, because I know there's another member who's been waiting very patiently, and I thank you, Mr. Falk, for your patience. I'm going to go to you right after Mr. Janis. Mr. Janis, on the point of order, please, succinct, direct on your point of orders so we can move forward.
I've been trying, Chair. I want to just kind of front a number of serious matters of order that I think require redress. First of all, Mr. Angus just accused me of lying, and that is clearly unparliamentary, and he should be chastised for that.
Mr. Janis,
am I allowed to say anything here?
Sorry,
am I allowed to say anything, Chair? Come
Mr. Janis, we do not want to use this platform of a committee to make accusations against members.
He just made an
So I will ask, okay, colleagues.
Like, you can't call someone a liar, and he just did.
Colleagues, I've had a number of members. I have a number of members speaking at the same time. A number of members. I appreciate, members, that you're all speaking to me, but the mics aren't on, because I think that's important for the health and safety of our interpreters. But it does make it difficult for me to proceed when we have this disorder. So I'm asking all colleagues once again.
But we have provided evidence
This, if you would like to proceed to challenging the ruling of the chair, which every member has the right to do, I encourage you to use your right to do that. I would encourage your right to do that, to move, to challenge the chair. So, Mr. Janis, I'm going to allow you very quickly, and I've said it before I move on to another member, but we're not going to engage into debate because I have not heard, we've engaged into debate, not succinctly provided the point of order you're referencing. I'm going to move on also to the next speaker, because there's a number of other people waiting on the original point of order. So, very quickly, provide your point of order so we can move forward, because we do need to move forward as a committee.
Chair, it is very clearly a matter of order that a member cannot accuse another member in Parliament or in committee of lying. Mr. Angus just explicitly did that. Yes. And now he's suggesting that I'm maligning him by pointing out the fact that he just on the record accused me of lying. That is a violation of the rules.
Mr. Janis, I will ask you to pause.
Of course.
I've asked you not to engage in debate and accusations against other members.
Chair, that is a matter of order.
We are...
Put on the clerk. Let me ask the clerk.
Yeah, can we hear from the clerk?
Can we hear from the clerk, please, Chair?
This is disorder and misconduct, please.
You're the one who called him a liar.
Worst part is, I know George's constituent.
So colleagues, I'm pausing here, and I hope I don't have to move forward again. But one member at a time and the opportunity to members to participate. I'm going to move to Mr. Falk on a point of order. You know what, Mr. Janis, I've given you a number of opportunities to, if you would like to make a point of order, succinctly.
My point of order is that I was accused of lying by another member, and that is a
Mr.
violation
Janis,
of the rules.
I would
That's
ask you to
very
turn off your mic
succinct.
because I have not recognized you at this point. If you could pause. If you can make your point of order succinctly so we can move forward. And so I'm going to give you an opportunity to make a succinct point of order so we can proceed with the proceedings of this committee. So, Mr. Janis, you have the floor. We have another colleague waiting on a point of order, so we can go to him. So, Mr. Janis, I will now go to you on your point of order, so you can complete your point of order. You've brought one forward. You have another one, and we can proceed. Go ahead, Mr. Janis.
Chair, I do have a number of points of order, but I do want to focus on the very narrow point of the rules specifying that it is unparliamentary for another member to accuse another member of lying. Mr. Angus did that. That is a matter of order. And you, as chair, have an obligation to enforce the rules, to call him to order. Ms. Lapointe accused me of using unparliamentary language. I asked her to clarify what she thinks I said that was unparliamentary. And she has thus far expressed no interest in responding to that request for clarification on that accusation. And you, Chair, have not followed up on that whatsoever. You
Mr.
have a
Janis,
responsibility to make
I'm actually going to ask you to
rulings.
pause right there to give Mr. Angus an opportunity to respond because there was an accusation made by the member that Mr. Angus has an opportunity to.
At issue here, Chair, is that the member has denied that I had the floor, which is a falsehood, and that the chair has ruled on that, but he will not challenge him. So the chair has ruled, the chair has been sustained, and now we see these attempt to drag a fight with Ms. Lapointe, who I think has held herself with dignity. This attempt to personalize it on me as though I am somehow a problem for being denied the ability to participate by these constant attempts to interfere. So I'd ask Chair to move on because I have the floor. I would certainly be ready to start speaking to the motion of Bill C-50 and 49 because I have workers who are dependent on us doing something. And if Mr. Janis's feelings are being hurt that he's being called out for his behavior of misconduct and disorder, as you have said, well, that is his issue. But my issue is speaking for the workers of this country.
Mr. Janis, as I've mentioned before,
Are you going to rule on point of order?
Mr. Janis, as I've membered,
Are you going to rule on the point of order?
so I've given you an opportunity to present your point of order.
Yeah.
I've given Mr. Angus an opportunity to respond and I'm going to ask you to hold for a second. So, colleagues, thank you for the point of order, Mr. Janis. I did not find Mr. Angus's intervention unparliamentary from what he just said and what he just restated. But what clarification was provided, and I will ask all members once again to not use unparliamentary language in this committee room with one another, and we focus on the work we are here to do on committee. Not to make accusations against each other, not to use unparliamentary language against one another, whoever that may be. We've had a number of meetings, and we should not be resorting to using unparliamentary language. Canadians, coast to coast to coast, are watching our deliberations today. That we focus on the task at hand. I will remind everybody that the task at hand is the motion that's on the floor by Mr. Sorbera on Bill C-50 and Bill C-49, which is the Canadian Sustainable Jobs Act, Bill C-50, and Bill C-49, which is the Atlantic Accords. The motion moved by Mr. Sorbera, which is an amendment then moved by Ms. Stubbs, and then also a sub-amendment moved by Mr. Falk. That's where we're at. Mr. Angus had the floor. The chair's ruling has not been challenged. This committee is at that point where Mr. Angus has the floor to be able to debate. Now, we do have other points of order. I'm going to go through the other points of order, which is Mr. Falk, you have a point of order. Thank you for waiting very patiently, Mr. Falk. Mr. Janice, Mr. Janice, that's not debatable.
I want you to clarify your ruling. Are you saying that members are allowed to call each other liars?
Turn off the mic, please.
They're talking over you, Chair.
Mr. Janice.
Are members allowed to call each other liars? Let's vote.
It's not debatable. So I will ask members, if the member does not like the ruling I've provided, to challenge the chair.
What's the ruling?
If the chair will now move to Mr. Falk. Mr. Falk, you have the floor on a point of order previously. Mr. Falk, go ahead, please, on the point of order.
Mr. Chair?
On your point of order, Chair.
Mr. Chair?
Why don't you let the clerk speak?
Got a point of order on mine.
Well,
We do want to fight for the free speech of the clerk.
Mr. Falk has a point of order.
I believe that
Mr.
Mr. Janice
Brusen-
has just challenged the chair, and I actually
Okay.
believe that we should vote to sustain the chair.
So,
No, I didn't.
Okay, yeah.
Point of order, of course he didn't.
He did challenge the chair. I heard it.
No, he didn't.
Yeah, he challenged
He
the
actually
chair.
didn't say those words.
This is incredible.
This is
Okay.
amazing
we will
gaslighting.
suspend.
Just because the staff wants to say it doesn't mean that it's true.
Falk, I'm going to go to you on a point of order, but before I do, sir, I'm just going to, for committee members, I'm going to give a quick reminder on some important reflections that I've had over the last few minutes. You know, on page 1058, chapter 20, partway down the paragraph of disorder and misconduct, it states, if a committee desires that specific sanctions be taken against those disrupting the proceedings, it must report the situation to the House. The House may then take such measures as it deems appropriate. Now, it says, in the event of disorder, the chair may suspend the meeting until order can be restored. And that's what I've done on several occasions today. On previous meetings, and on this one, the concern for the health and safety of our interpreters, of members speaking over each other with many mics on, was a concern, and it still is a concern. Today, I'm very delighted to see that we have not gone down that path because I know our interpreters are very grateful for one mic at a time, and I'm very grateful that we are taking the health and safety of our interpreters seriously, and I hope that will continue. As mentioned, I will suspend the meeting if I feel that the health and safety of our interpreters is being jeopardized. Now, where we left off of decisions of the chair and appeals. On page 159, chapter 20, decisions by the chair are not debatable. It says very clearly here. They can, however, be appealed to the committee. So, colleagues, every member of this committee has the right to participate in the proceedings of this committee. If you feel that a decision that's being made is not one that you believe was the one, you have a right to challenge the chair and the ruling, not to engage in debate, but to challenge the chair. That is a rule clearly stated. I would encourage members to use that if you deem that it's necessary. I would also encourage members to allow members to participate. An important part of this committee's proceedings are that members who have the floor are able to debate the motions that are presented. I'm going to remind for all those folks sitting at home who may have just tuned in where we're at. We have a motion on the floor on the Canadian Sustainable Jobs Act, Bill C-50, and the Atlantic Accords, presented by Mr. Sribrara. We then have an amendment that was brought forward by Ms. Stubbs. We then have a sub-amendment that was brought forward by Mr. Falk, which we are currently on and debating. On that sub-amendment, Mr. Angus has the floor, and he has, as a member of this committee, has not been given the opportunity to participate in debate on an important sub-amendment that actually is related to his constituency. Now, I hope that provides clarity to all members. I know Mr. Falk, who's brought forward this sub-amendment, would like to see it presented and debated. I know Mr. Falk also has a point of order. So now I'm going to go to Mr. Falk on the point of order. Mr. Falk, sir, on the point of order. And Mr. Falk, sorry, and before you begin, I would ask members on point of orders, please be succinct and let's not engage in debate. I want to give you the opportunity to make your relevant point of order. So, Mr. Falk, you have the floor, sir, on a point of order.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and yeah, I've waited a while to make my observations here and discuss my point of order. First of all, I want to start off by saying on my sub-amendment that I made when the meeting was suspended in the debate on that motion, Mr. Janis had the floor and should have been given the floor at the subsequent meeting.
Mr. Falk, sorry, I'm going to just remind you that the chair had made a ruling, and that ruling was made. There's the ability of committee members to challenge the chair. So we're not going to engage on a point of order in debate of that ruling. If there's a challenge to the speaking order and a ruling, you can challenge the chair, sir. So I would ask you to, on the point of order that you are now bringing forward, what the point of order is, and if you could present that, please, and not engage into debate on a previous ruling that's been made, but use your point of order to bring forward the procedural concern that you have on the point of order that you've raised, I believe, on a previous point of order that was made some time back. So if you could bring us back to the point of order that you had, and I'd like to acknowledge, have waited patiently on the previous point of order because we've had many other members also had point of orders as well on that point of order. So I'll ask you to proceed and not engage in debate, but specifically on the point of order at hand that you're raising right now. Go ahead, sir.
Okay, yes, thanks, Mr. Chair. And just to be clear, I was actually not debating. I was just clearly making an observation, which I believe the chair should consider, but it's not a point of debate. It's just my observation of my recollection of that meeting. So my point of order is that I have, Mr. Janis got cut off when he was expanding on his point of order. And what I have noticed is that whenever Mr. Janis is making his point of order, he frequently is interrupted with other points of order, which you immediately stop his point of order and defer to the other points of order. But in the cases of when Mr. Angus or Mr. Kellaway were making points of order, there were points of order interrupting their points of order, which you did not accept, but you allowed them to continue to make your point of order. And so my suggestion would be, if you want to maintain a little better decorum here, that you not allow some members, some parties, to be able to interrupt points of orders and others not. And if you apply, no, I'm not actually quite finished.
So we are engaging into debate. I do recognize what you've stated on the point of order, Mr. Falk. The ability for members to make a point of order and to be heard one at a time is something I've tried to do. But all members have a right to participate. And so I would thank you for your point of order. I would remind colleagues to allow members to participate. And so I'll ask you to finish up on your point of order and not engage into debate, but specifically on the point of order so we can move on to the next point of order.
Thank you, because I was going to remind you that you didn't interrupt Mr. Kellaway or Mr. Angus when they were making their points of order, but you just interrupted me. And I just want to point that out. And I want the audience to be able to observe that.
So, Mr. Falk,
my point of order is this. My point of order is this. Mr. Janis, in his point of order, asked Ms. Lapointe to clarify exactly what the unparliamentary language that she referred to Mr. Janis as using, what that was, so he could address that. And I'm sure if there was legitimate unparliamentary language being used, that Mr. Janis would love the opportunity to apologize, if that really is the case.
Mr. Falk, thank you for your point of order. The chair previously ruled on parliamentary language that may have occurred during this committee and previous committees, and I've reminded members of our duties as members. But I would also remind Mr. Falk, you raised an important point on previously on an interruption that was made when Mr. Kellaway had the floor was in his partway through his point of order where disorder occurred in this committee when I, as the chair, had to suspend. So once again, no, I'm colleagues. We are not going to use a point of order to engage in debate.
Mr. Chair,
as the chair, I would ask you respectfully, sir, that I had to suspend the meeting previously because a member was interrupted and a number of members conducted in disorder, which led me to suspend this meeting. And as mentioned earlier, I will not hesitate at any point. As committee members, it's our duty to respect each other, to work together, to follow parliamentary rules that are in place, which I previously stated, to ensure a good working environment for everybody who supports us at this committee, whether it's our clerks, our analysts, the health and safety of our interpreters. We must take that very seriously. Now,
but Mr.
we are
Chair,
we're gonna move to Mr. Sobrera.
Mr. Chair,
on
to finish
the next point of order.
my point of order.
Mr. Falk, you've addressed your point of order.
No, but
if
I
there's
wasn't
another
finished.
point of order,
But I wasn't
I'm going to
finished.
move forward. I thank you for
Sir,
raising our point of order,
you
sir.
let Mr. Kellaway finish his complete thought before
So,
you interrupted.
Chair, as I've ruled on your point of order, I've
I
provided
wasn't
you.
even finished.
You have an opportunity.
I think there's a challenge to the chair.
You
Did
can
I hear
challenge
a
the chair if
challenge
you'd
to the
like.
chair?
I'm moving to Mr. Sorbara on his
I
point
heard
of
a
order.
challenge to the
Mr.
chair.
Sorbara,
Mr. Shahel.
Challenge to the chair.
Mr. Sorbara,
He
I
just
would ask
challenged the
you.
Like you've got to treat every member equally.
Challenge the chair.
Sorry, Mr. Sorbara, I'm going to wait.
Thank you, Chair.
Mr. Sorbara, can you wait one moment, please?
Finish his point of order. Let Mr. Falk
Oh, challenge the chair.
Sunlight.
He challenged the chair. No, he challenged the chair.
Wishes to finish his point of order. Mr. Falk, kindly finish your point of order, then I'll just go after you. Okay, come on.
That sounds like a very common sense solution.
The common sense.
I'd say it's a very
Let's- I think-
gentlemanly thing to do.
It's common sense and gentlemanly.
United for our common hope.
United for a common.
So, thank you, Mr. Sorbara, for offering that. But Mr. Sorbara, a decision's been made. I'm going to move to you on the point of order.
Wow. Your
If you
point
could
of order
be-
was allowing me the floor, I believe.
Mr. Sorbara, I would ask you, sir, to be direct and succinct on your point of order, and so we can proceed with the next point of order.
Chair, I very much wish to be quite brief. I put forward a motion, I believe you would, really a regular scheduling motion for our committee to go over Bill C-50 and C-49. It is November 8th today, if I'm correct. We would have had the minister here today with us on committee, looking at two important pieces of legislation for all Canadians and for all parts of the country. I would hope we could get, and I believe there's an amendment on the table or a sub-amendment on the floor. If I can get clarification, there's a sub-amendment that is being debated right now. I would hope that all parties can get to a point where we can vote on the sub-amendment, vote on then the revised amendment, if I'm my
Mr.
train of
Sorbara,
thought.
I'd ask you to just on the
Yeah.
point of order, I think.
And if we can go down that tangent as quickly as possible, C-49 is important for Atlantic Canadians, C-50 is important for all Canadians.
So, I just want to address, I think you're asking a procedural question on where we're at.
So I am most certainly asking a procedural question of where
Okay,
we're at
a
and
reminder.
Read your chat.
So, colleagues, I just want to provide a reminder once again. We had a motion on the floor by Mr. Sorbara on the Canadian Sustainable Jobs Act, Bill C-50, and the Atlantic Accords, Bill C-49. We have an amendment brought forward to Mr. Sorbara's main motion by Ms. Stubbs. And we have had a sub-amendment brought forward by Mr. Falk. And we are on the sub-amendment of Mr. Falk. And Mr. Angus has the floor on the sub-amendment with many other members waiting. Now, I'm going to go to, we have a few folks on a point of order, which I'm going to go to a point of order to, there's a few people that I'm going to go through, but we're going to go to Ms. Stubbs first on the point of order, and then we'll go to the next member after Ms. Stubbs on the point of order. Ms. Stubbs, as a reminder, other committee members, please be succinct on your point of order, and the floor is yours on the point of order.
Mr. Chair, I did have 2 points of order. What would you like me to address?
Ms. Stubbs, I'm not sure what your point of order is, but I would ask you not to get into debate, but present your point of order. So if it's a ruling that we need to make, we can make that ruling. If it's a point of order of concern, you can raise it. Just be that you be succinct on your point of order so we can proceed with other members and their point of orders.
Thanks, Chair. Well, I guess I would just point out, thank Mr. Kellaway for his participation here. And I do look forward to his support of my sub-amendment, which of course is asking for C49 to be studied first, as it was introduced, passed, and time allocated through the House of Commons. And of course, Mr. Sobera's scheduling programming motion puts it second. So I just want to clarify that. But Chair, to the point of order related to Chapter 20, we had asked to hear from the clerk on a number of issues, and I just wanted to quote on Chapter 20. Okay? You've addressed Chapter 20 a lot, so I'm going to too. A nonpartisan and independent officer, the clerk serves equally all members of the committee as well as representatives of all parties. ... The clerk advises all members. The clerk is at the service of all members, regardless of party affiliation, and must act with impartiality and discretion. Of course, there's a lot more words of that. I'm sure the clerk can advise you. We, on a number of occasions, have asked for the clerk, who serves us equally and nonpartisanly and would respond to us all as MPs who are duly elected and equal in our capacities here on behalf of the people who sent us here to do these jobs. And although it's a pattern, I guess, of censorship and shutting down free speech, I just wonder why we can't actually have the clerk address us on the number of issues that we're raising that relate to a lack of confidence and credibility in the chair's own equal and impartial enforcement of the rules. But why is it that we can't hear from the clerk when we've asked to hear from the clerk?
Ms. Stubbs, and I appreciate the confidence. Ms. DeBrussen, I will go to your point of order, but I just want to comment and rule.
That was a challenge to the chair.
No,
I was asking to hear the clerk.
The chair has been elected by committee members to work on behalf of the committee. If there is a challenge to the chair on a ruling, committee members have the right to challenge the chair. I've yet today's meeting have not heard a challenge of the chair, so I would ask members, if there's a ruling you do not like, if you do not like the speaking order that's in place, like this committee has previously done, we have the ability of members to challenge the chair. The chair is here
Mr.
to work
Chair,
on.
I didn't ask about you. I asked about the clerk and hearing from the clerk as a nonpartisan servant of this committee and all members of Parliament,
Ms. Stubbs,
despite our partisan affiliation.
I would ask you not to turn on your mic until you're recognized.
You would understand one feels one doesn't know
how
else to be heard.
I will ask colleagues to challenge the chair once again as members of this committee. You've elected me as your chair. If you would like, thank you, Mr. Angus and others, I would ask all members, while I have the floor, that's when this mic, the red light's on, means that I have the floor and that I can finish what I'm saying. so the interpreters can transcribe clearly on what I am saying. And what I am saying is this committee has elected myself as the chair of this committee. If a member does not like my ruling, a member can challenge the chair. And I would ask members that you challenge a decision if it's something that you do not believe is a decision you like. And members of this committee have the power through that mechanism to vote to uphold the ruling of the chair and sustain the ruling or overturn the ruling. That is the power that members of parliament have on this committee. So Ms. DeBrusen, you had a point of order, Mr. Brusen, and if you, I would, Mr. Brusen on the point of order.
Yeah, we're getting off the order too, which is why we need to hear.
Mr. Chair, I believe that each time that the members opposite say that they have lost confidence in the decision of the chair and actively say that they do not, and I have heard the members opposite say that they disagree with your ruling that Mr. Angus has the floor, which is a ruling you made now days ago. If they are not respecting your ruling, I believe they are challenging the chair. That is, and I believe it's time that we give, if they are not challenging the chair, I would say let's give Mr. Angus the floor so we can continue with the sub-amendment.
On that point of order, Chair.
Is there a challenge?
Point of order, could you not hear? Or?
Is there a challenge to the chair's ruling?
Why are you guys hearing things that aren't being said? I have a point of order.
So I have a few point of orders here, and I'm trying to get Mr. Patzer. Do you have a point of order on Ms. DeBrusen's point of order? And I'll ask you, I'm not. Sorry, no. Thank you, Mr. Patzer. No, that's okay. I would ask you, like I've stated to all members, to be direct with your point of order and be succinct, and so we can move to the next point of order. And so on the point of order, on what Mr. Brusen said, please, directly to that.
Well, yeah, and it's building off of a point that she had made, and I think this might help provide clarity so that we can proceed. And I think that's in the best interest of the committee, I would assume. And it goes all the way back a couple of meetings because a point of privilege was raised. The words from your mouth were that you granted the point of privilege to Mr. Jennis. Now, if you read a little bit further in chapter 20.
Mr. Patzer, we're not going to get, so Mr. Patzer, a ruling was made previously. A ruling was made previously and upheld by this committee.
You made a ruling.
If
This is important.
Mr. Patzer, I'm going to ask you to hold for one moment till all members. So, Mr. Brusen, you've raised a point of order on Mr. Brusen's point of order. I want you to be clear on what we don't want to engage in debate. What I want you to do is just be clear and succinct, directly what Mr. Brusen's point of order was, what you raised a point of order on. Okay? So if I'll give you, go ahead. You have the floor on the point of order to what Mr. Brusen said.
Okay, thank you. Because it's on a point that she had made, and I think this helps to provide clarity. I am reading and quoting from Boscan Gagnon, so I am not debating her.
Correct.
Okay, it says on the front of the book, procedure and practice, that if a member wishes to raise a question of privilege during a committee meeting or an incident arises in connection with the committee's proceedings that may constitute a breach of privilege, the committee chair allows the member to explain the situation. Charlie, it's page 1060 if you want to read along.
So, Mr. Patzer,
please let me finish because it's.
Hold on, Mr. Patzer. I've given you a number of opportunities. This does not have anything to do with what was raised by Mr. Brusen on the point of order. Well,
Point of order.
so, okay. Mr. Patzer, we have a point of order on your point of order by Ms. Lapointe.
Can I please finish, though?
I'm going to ask, it's a pause. I'm going to ask Ms. Lapointe on the point of order, please.
So my point of order is on the disorder that's occurring within this committee in not yielding the floor and persistent interruptions. So I'm going to ask again that we each respect the person who has the floor and that we also respect the chair. I have seen crosstalk, talking over the chair, talking over whoever has the mic. Can we please try to conduct ourselves in an orderly way and respect the proceedings? Thank you.
Thank you.
Chair, they're turning it into a mob against Ms. Lapointe again.
Oh, Charlie put on his mic. Chair. Oh, Chair, put on his mic.
I thought we're not supposed to put our mic on ourselves. No, not put on. Wait. She needs to correct these. Francesca, tell them to apply the rules.
Okay, we will suspend. Mr. Patzer, first of all, on your point of order, which was to something that's occurred from a few days ago, that has been ruled on and sustained by this committee. So, colleagues, we are at time for the committee meeting today. I know we're having an engaging debate this evening. We're going to endeavor to get further resources for tomorrow. I look forward to seeing you all upon that happening. and the meeting is suspended for this evening. One kind of cool.